Everyone in that mansion believed it was over. The billionaire's only son was fading, one heartbeat at a time. Doctors had given up, nurses had packed their things, and hope itself had left the room. But then, a quiet maid stepped forward. No medical degree. No power. Just faith, and a pair of steady hands. And what happened next? No one could explain. Welcome back, my beautiful family and friends. If you're hooked in and you're ready to enjoy this story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow, I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one. And you don't want to miss it. Now let us begin. Morning sunlight slid softly through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Sterling mansion, painting golden streaks across the marble counters. The kitchen, usually humming with quiet chatter and the rhythmic clatter of breakfast preparations, had fallen into a strange kind of silence. The smell of disinfectant hung thick in the air, sharp, sterile, and wrong. Doctors moved in and out like exhausted ghosts. Nurses whispered in corners, avoiding eye contact. And in the middle of it all, on the vast white counter where fruit bowls and coffee cups once stood, lay baby William Sterling, 8 months old, pale, fragile, fighting for breath. His tiny chest rose and fell unevenly, each inhale a desperate negotiation with life. Aaron Sterling, the man everyone in the country called the miracle billionaire, stood by the window, staring blankly at the horizon. He had built an empire from nothing, turned technology into gold, and carried the weight of boardrooms and headlines with effortless control. But this, watching his son fade away, had reduced him to silence. His tie hung loose. His eyes were hollow. For the first time in his life, he looked like a man who couldn't buy an answer. "His oxygen's dropping again," murmured one of the nurses, glancing nervously at the screen. Another doctor, flown in from Zurich just 3 days ago, scribbled notes on a clipboard, pretending not to notice the helplessness in the room. They had tried everything: oxygen therapy, imported formulas, vitamin infusions, even a private clinic consultation streamed over video. Nothing worked. Aaron turned toward Victoria, his wife, standing a few steps away. Her makeup was perfect, as always, too perfect. She held a silk handkerchief to her nose, pretending to weep, but her eyes betrayed no grief. Only irritation. Her patience had run out days ago, and she hated how this crisis had turned their mansion into a hospital. "He'll be fine," she said coldly, brushing an invisible speck of dust from her sleeve. "He just needs rest. All this medical fuss is exhausting him." Aaron didn't respond. He didn't have the strength to argue anymore. And in the corner of the room, quietly folding linens by the sink, stood Angela. She'd been there every day since the boy was born, washing bottles, mopping floors, making herself invisible. A black maid in a white house full of privilege and glass. People rarely noticed her unless she made a mistake. She preferred it that way. But that morning, something felt different. She couldn't ignore the quiet. The wrongness in the air. Angela's dark eyes followed the movement of the doctors, the clinking of glass, the slow rise of the baby's chest. She'd seen sick children before, had helped raise half the neighborhood's babies back home, but this child's stillness wasn't natural. His lips trembled faintly between gasps, and his fingers twitched as if trying to hold onto something unseen. She stepped closer, pretending to adjust the blanket. The baby's skin was cool to the touch. His eyelids fluttered weakly, and for the briefest second, his gaze met hers, cloudy, tired, pleading. It wasn't the blank stare of illness, it was the silent cry of someone trapped in their own body. Angela swallowed hard. Her heart began to race. "Mrs. Sterling," she whispered carefully. "He's still very cold, ma'am. Maybe he needs—" Victoria snapped, not even looking up. "Angela, that will be all. Go clean the patio. The doctors are handling it." Angela stepped back, biting her lip. Her hands clenched the cloth she was holding. Something inside her, something beyond logic, screamed that they were missing something. By noon, the doctors declared they needed to run more tests. Machines beeped, nurses rushed in, and Aaron sat motionless by the counter, staring at his son as if memorizing his face in case he didn't wake up again. Angela couldn't bear it. She slipped into the hallway, leaning against the wall, fighting tears. "Lord," she whispered under her breath. "If you're here, please don't let this child go. Show me what's wrong." Outside, rain began to fall, soft and steady, tapping against the glass like an answer she couldn't yet understand. Hours passed. The house dimmed as evening approached. Most of the staff had gone home, but Angela stayed. She told the head butler she needed to finish disinfecting the counters. In truth, she just couldn't walk away. When she returned to the kitchen, the doctors were packing up their equipment. "We'll run a full analysis tonight," one of them said to Aaron. "But I won't lie, his organs are weakening. If he doesn't respond by morning." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Victoria sighed dramatically, then walked out, muttering something about needing rest. Aaron pressed a hand over his mouth, staring at his son. "I'd give everything," he whispered, "everything I've built, if someone could just help him." Angela stood in the shadows, unseen. She looked at the baby again. His tiny chest moved in slow, shallow breaths. And then something caught her eye, the faint shimmer of milk in a glass bottle sitting near the edge of the counter. The nurse had left it there earlier. She walked closer. The smell was faint but strange, sweet, almost floral, but with a bitter undertone that made her nose wrinkle. It didn't smell like baby formula. Not the kind she'd used for her nieces and nephews. She hesitated, glancing around. The doctors were gone. The room was empty except for the quiet hum of the machines. She picked up the bottle, sniffed again, and frowned. The scent reminded her of something, not food, but medicine. A sedative she'd smelled once when caring for her elderly neighbor years ago. Angela's heart began to pound. She placed the bottle back exactly where it was and stepped away, her mind racing. Could this be it? Could the milk itself be the reason he's not waking up properly? She thought of speaking up, but the memory of Victoria's sharp tongue stopped her. What if she was wrong? What if they accused her of tampering with it? Still, as she cleaned the counters and wiped the silver trays, her thoughts wouldn't quiet. Every time she glanced at the baby, the image of his flickering eyes haunted her. When her shift finally ended, she walked past Aaron's office. He was sitting in the dark, head in hands. The glow from his computer reflected unread messages, reports, financial charts. None of it mattered anymore. "Good night, sir," Angela said softly. He didn't respond. He barely heard her. As she walked away, she whispered a promise to herself. "Tomorrow, I'll find out what's really in that milk." That night, long after everyone slept, Angela lay awake in her small room above the garage. Rain drummed against the roof. She couldn't shake the baby's face from her mind, that silent plea, the way his tiny hand had tried to move when she touched him. Her instincts, that quiet voice that had guided her through every hardship, told her this wasn't nature or bad luck. It was something being done. Something deliberate. And somewhere between midnight prayers and dawn's first light, Angela made a decision that would change everything. She was going to uncover the truth, even if it meant losing everything she had. Because sometimes, the smallest voice in the quietest room is the only one that truly hears the cry no one else does. Night had fallen heavy over the Sterling mansion. Rain whispered against the windows, steady and unbroken, as if the sky itself mourned. The lights in the upper hallway burned low, a soft amber glow spilling across polished marble floors. Somewhere deep inside the vast house, a clock chimed once, then faded into silence. Angela was still awake. She shouldn't have been. Her shift had ended hours ago, but her spirit would not rest. The baby's cries had followed her all evening, faint, weak, uncertain. She'd cleaned every surface twice, but no bleach could wash away the ache in her chest. She was haunted by the sound of those little breaths, uneven and frightened. When the storm grew louder, she found herself standing outside the nursery door. It wasn't part of her duty. She was supposed to stay on the ground floor, away from the family quarters. But tonight, duty meant nothing, only that tiny heartbeat did. Angela turned the knob gently and stepped inside. The room was dimly lit, washed in the bluish glow of a nightlight shaped like a teddy bear. The air smelled faintly of lavender disinfectant and formula. Machines beeped softly near the crib, each tone measuring a fragile life in intervals of fear. Baby William lay wrapped in a white blanket, his chest rising too slowly, his lips pale. His small hand rested near his face, unmoving. Angela's throat tightened. "Oh, sweetheart," she whispered, barely breathing the words. No nurse was present. No doctor. Just the hum of machines and the rain outside. She approached the crib and touched his hand lightly, the way her mother once taught her to do with fevered babies, gently, so they'd know comfort before strength. His skin was still cool. His eyelids fluttered as if fighting to open. Angela looked around the room. The bottles were lined up neatly on a silver tray beside the bed. Glass, expensive, foreign. Each one marked with printed labels, written in a language she didn't understand. She lifted one, hesitated, then sniffed. That same scent hit her, faintly sweet, but unnatural. Something chemical lurked beneath the surface. Her heart began to pound. She checked another bottle. The same smell. Then from the corner of her eye, she saw movement. The head nurse, walking briskly down the corridor outside. Angela froze. A moment later, the nurse stepped into the nursery, her white shoes squeaking faintly on the polished floor. "What are you doing here?" she demanded. Angela lowered her gaze. "I heard him crying, ma'am. Thought I could soothe him." The nurse's lips tightened. "Your job is to clean, not interfere." "Yes, ma'am." But the nurse wasn't finished. "And don't touch his things. That formula costs more than your yearly pay." Angela bowed her head, her heart burning, and whispered, "Yes, ma'am." The nurse turned away, adjusting the monitor near the crib. "Poor child," she muttered. "Some babies just aren't strong enough." Angela bit her tongue. No, she thought. That's not it. He's not weak. Something is making him weak. When the nurse finally left, Angela exhaled shakily. Her palms were damp with sweat. She waited a few seconds to be sure the woman was gone, then looked again at the tray of bottles. Her instincts screamed that this was wrong, every part of her being said so. But instincts alone wouldn't save this child. She needed proof. Quietly, she reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a clean handkerchief. She uncapped one of the bottles and let a single drop of the milk soak into the fabric. Then she folded it neatly, slipped it back into her pocket, and whispered, "Lord, guide me." She left the nursery as quietly as she had come, her footsteps light, her mind racing. Downstairs, she moved through the dark corridors like a shadow, the sound of her heart louder than the rain. She entered the back hall where her phone lay charging on a shelf. With trembling hands, she scrolled through her contacts until she found a number she hadn't called in years. "Mrs. Dorsey," she whispered into the phone, her voice trembling. "It's Angela. I need your help." There was a pause. The voice on the other end was slow and kind, worn with age. "Angela, child. It's been years. What's wrong? You used to work in pediatrics, right? You remember medicine, baby care." A quiet sigh. "I remember enough to help. What's going on?" Angela hesitated, glancing around as though the walls themselves might be listening. "There's a baby, my employer's son. The doctors say he's sick, but it doesn't feel right. The milk, it smells off. Sweet, then bitter. Like medicine." The line went quiet. For a long moment, Angela thought she'd lost the call. Then Mrs. Dorsey's voice returned, grave and slow. "Angela, if the milk smells bitter, it's not milk. It's laced with something. Some medications, sedatives, pain suppressants, they make it smell like that. If a baby drinks that long enough, he won't wake." Angela gripped the phone tighter. "You mean it could be hurting him?" "Yes," the old nurse whispered. "Or worse." Angela's knees went weak. She sank into a chair, her heart pounding in her ears. "Dear Lord." "Listen to me carefully," Mrs. Dorsey continued. "You can't accuse anyone yet. You need evidence. Keep that sample safe. Take it to someone you trust, someone who can test it properly." Angela nodded, even though the woman couldn't see her. "I understand." "And child?" "Yes, ma'am." "Be careful who you tell. Not everyone in that house wants that baby to live." The words sank deep into Angela's bones like ice. She ended the call with shaking hands, her breath unsteady. The storm outside roared louder, thunder rolling across the sky like a warning. She slipped the folded handkerchief into a sealed sandwich bag from the pantry and hid it beneath a loose tile in the maid's quarters. Her heart raced as she replaced the tile and sat back, whispering a prayer for strength. Sleep didn't come. Every creak of the mansion sounded like footsteps. Every gust of wind like a whisper of threat. When dawn finally broke, she returned to the kitchen, her eyes red but steady. Aaron sat there, still in the same clothes, head bowed. "Morning, sir," Angela said softly. He nodded absently, not looking up. He made it through the night, he murmured. Barely. Angela hesitated. She wanted to tell him everything, right there, about the milk, the scent, the warning. But fear held her back. She was just the maid. He trusted doctors, not her. Instead, she looked toward the nursery and whispered, "Hold on, little one. Just hold on." Her faith, her intuition, her courage, all of it was about to be tested. Because by the end of that day, she would no longer be just a maid. She would be the only person standing between life and death, between innocence and deceit. And the first clue to it all had come from something as small, as simple, as the smell of the milk. Morning crept into the Sterling mansion like a hesitant apology, soft, pale, and uncertain. The rain had stopped, leaving the air thick with silence and the faint smell of damp marble. The house looked peaceful from the outside, but inside, the walls carried secrets that pressed against every breath. Angela was already awake, her apron neatly tied, her hair wrapped beneath her pink scarf. But this morning, her hands wouldn't stop trembling. She had barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw baby William's face, small, still fading, and heard Mrs. Dorsey's voice echoing in her head. Not everyone in that house wants that baby to live. The words haunted her like a prayer turned warning. She moved through the mansion quietly, polishing surfaces, refilling flower vases, doing all the things that kept her invisible. But her eyes were everywhere. She watched the nurses, the bottles, the way the head nurse checked the clock before each feeding. She noticed how Victoria, Aaron's glamorous, icy wife, barely glanced at the baby when she passed the nursery. Angela's instincts, sharpened by years of silence, screamed louder now. Every movement, every scent, every word in that house carried weight. And today, she couldn't ignore it anymore. When she entered the kitchen, she found Victoria there, dressed immaculately in pale silk despite the early hour. She was talking to one of the doctors, a tall man with slicked-back hair and a polite smile that didn't reach his eyes. Angela busied herself by the counter, pretending not to listen, but every word carried clear across the marble. "He's stable for now," the doctor said, "but the sedatives must have cleared completely before we try another formula change." Sedatives. The word struck like lightning. Victoria frowned faintly. "I thought the dosage was harmless." "It is," the doctor replied quickly, lowering his voice. "But it builds up. You'll need to be cautious." Angela froze. Her grip on the glass rag tightened until her knuckles turned white. She didn't dare turn around. The conversation ended as quickly as it began. The doctor left through the side door, and Victoria poured herself a glass of orange juice, humming softly, unconcerned, untouched. Angela stood rooted to the spot, her heart thundering. Dosage. Harmless. Builds up. Now she knew. It wasn't illness. It was intent. The maid turned toward the hallway, but before she could leave, Victoria's voice floated behind her. "Angela, be sure to wash all the bottles from last night." Angela's mouth went dry. "Yes, ma'am." She waited until Victoria's heels faded up the stairs before approaching the tray of bottles. There were 3, half full. The same faint smell clung to them, sweet, floral, bitter. She touched one gently. Her pulse quickened. Her first instinct was to throw them away, to destroy every trace of poison that had hurt the child. But she remembered Mrs. Dorsey's warning, "You need evidence." Angela grabbed a clean towel, wrapped one of the bottles carefully, and slipped it into a grocery bag. Then she took a deep breath and headed toward Aaron's office. He was sitting behind his desk, papers scattered everywhere, eyes bloodshot from sleepless nights. He barely looked up when she entered. "Sir." Angela's voice shook slightly. "May I have a word?" He sighed heavily, rubbing his temples. "Angela, not now, please. The doctors." She stepped forward, clutching the bag tighter. "Sir, I know I'm not supposed to say much. But I think something's wrong with what they're feeding him." Aaron's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "I don't think he's sick, sir. I think someone's giving him something." For a moment, the room went completely still. The only sound was the slow ticking of the clock on the wall. Aaron leaned back, disbelief shadowing his face. "Angela, you're suggesting, what, exactly?" "That someone's poisoning my son." Her voice was quiet but steady. "I'm saying I don't trust that milk." He stared at her for a long time, as if weighing whether this was grief talking or madness. Do you have proof? Angela hesitated, then lifted the bag onto his desk. I saved one of the bottles, sir. If you send it to a lab, you'll see. Aaron blinked, unsure whether to be angry or grateful. Angela, you could lose your job over this accusation. I'd rather lose my job than watch that baby die, she said softly. Something in her tone broke through his exhaustion, not defiance, but sincerity. The kind of truth that doesn't come from fear. He stared at the bag for a long time, then nodded slowly. All right. I'll have it tested. Angela bowed her head and turned to leave. That evening, she returned to her small room above the garage, praying under her breath. Please, Lord, let him believe me. Let him see what's true. Hours passed before the call came. Aaron's voice was low, trembling, and very different. Angela, can you come to my office? Her heart pounded as she descended the stairs. The mansion was quiet, too quiet. When she entered the office, Aaron was standing by the window, phone in hand, his face pale. He turned toward her slowly. They found traces of barbiturates, he said. Sedatives. Enough to stop his breathing if it continued. Angela's breath caught. So it's true. He nodded, eyes glassy. You were right. For a moment the billionaire, the man who owned entire buildings, who commanded armies of lawyers, looked utterly human. Vulnerable. Sir, Angela whispered, we have to find out who's been doing this. Aaron exhaled shakily. I already know who. He walked to his desk, picked up the lab report, and handed it to her. At the bottom, in the supplier's notes, was the initials VS, Victoria Sterling. The realization hit like ice water. Angela covered her mouth. Your wife. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. For a long time, neither spoke. The world outside the window glimmered with city lights, a million lives moving on, unaware that in this quiet mansion, one man's empire had just cracked open. Aaron sank into his chair, his voice breaking. She said the baby was a burden. That I was too attached. I thought she was just jealous. I didn't know. Angela stepped closer, tears in her eyes. You know now, sir. And God gave you the chance to fix it before it was too late. He looked up at her, eyes shining with gratitude and disbelief. You saved my son, Angela. She shook her head. No, sir. I just listened. The baby's cry echoed faintly down the hall, weak, but alive. And for the first time in days, Aaron allowed himself to hope. The next morning dawned clear and sharp, as if the storm had washed the world clean but left the truth behind. The Sterling mansion gleamed in the sunlight, quiet, immaculate, pretending innocence. But beneath its polished marble and imported glass, something had shifted. For the first time in days, baby William slept peacefully, his breathing steady and calm. His tiny chest rose and fell with the rhythm of life, soft and certain. The doctors called it a miraculous recovery, crediting a sudden immune response. But Aaron knew better now. He sat in the nursery beside his son's crib, his gaze distant, his jaw tight. He couldn't stop thinking of the lab report, the one that confirmed Angela's suspicion. Sedatives. Barbiturates. Intentional poisoning. And the initials at the bottom of the supplier's note, VS. Victoria Sterling. His wife. He turned the paper over again and again, hoping somehow the letters would change, that it had been a mistake. But the truth doesn't bend. It waits, patient and cold, until you're ready to face it. Angela entered the room quietly, holding a tray with a pot of tea. Her steps were soft, her presence calm, the only thing in that house that didn't feel fragile. He looks better today, she said gently, glancing at the baby. Aaron nodded faintly. Thanks to you. She set the tray down, shaking her head. Thanks to God, sir. I only did what was right. Aaron looked at her, studying the woman he had overlooked for years, the woman who had quietly served in the background while others played at power and deceit. Her eyes, warm and deep, held no pride. Only conviction. Angela, he said slowly, how did you know? Out of everyone, how did you see what no one else did? She hesitated, then smiled softly. Because I've learned to listen to what others ignore, sir. Sometimes the truth doesn't shout. It whispers. Her words stayed with him long after she left. That afternoon, Victoria descended the grand staircase, perfume preceding her like a warning. She was radiant, pearls at her throat, silk flowing like water. To anyone else, she looked like the picture of elegance. But Aaron could now see what lay beneath: calculation, coldness, vanity. "Good morning, darling," she purred, gliding into the kitchen where Aaron stood by the counter. "I hear our little one is feeling better. Isn't that wonderful?" Aaron didn't answer. He was staring at her, studying her face the way a man studies an unfamiliar map, seeing the lines of deceit he'd once mistaken for beauty. She raised an eyebrow. "What's wrong?" He placed the lab report on the counter between them. "You tell me." Her eyes flicked to the page, then back to him. For a moment, something flashed across her face, a spark of recognition, quickly masked by confusion. "What is this?" she asked lightly. "You tell me," he repeated. His voice was calm, but the air around him had changed, heavier, colder. "It's the lab report for Williams' formula. They found sedatives. Barbiturates." Victoria froze. "That's absurd." "Is it?" he asked quietly. "Then perhaps you can explain why the initials VS are on the supplier's receipt." The silence stretched thin as glass. Then, slowly, Victoria laughed, a brittle, practiced sound. "Aaron, this is ridiculous. Someone must be trying to frame me. Probably that maid of yours, the one who's suddenly taken such an interest in my child." Aaron's gaze didn't waver. "Her name is Angela. And she saved his life." Victoria's laughter faltered. Aaron stepped closer, his tone low. "You said you wanted peace and quiet. That you couldn't stand the crying. Did you decide to solve that permanently?" Her mask cracked. For a second, her eyes turned cold and sharp as a blade. "You think I would hurt my own child?" she hissed. Aaron's voice trembled, a mix of rage and heartbreak. "He's not your child, Victoria. He's mine. And you've never loved anything you didn't control." Her hand twitched. For the first time, she looked afraid. Not of guilt, but of exposure. Before she could speak, the sound of footsteps echoed from the hallway. 2 officers entered, led by Angela and the family lawyer. Victoria turned pale. "You called the police?" Aaron's eyes glistened, but his voice was steady. "You left me no choice." The officers read her the warrant, their words calm and rehearsed, while Victoria stood frozen, her beauty suddenly hollow, her confidence shattered. When they placed the cuffs on her wrists, she looked straight at Angela, venom in her gaze. "This is your doing," she spat. Angela met her eyes without fear. "No, ma'am," she said softly. "This is your undoing." The house felt impossibly still after Victoria was taken away. Aaron sat in the living room, head in hands, the weight of betrayal pressing against his chest. Angela stood nearby, quietly picking up the baby's toys. He looked up after a long silence. "You must think I'm a fool." She smiled sadly. "No, sir. You're a man who trusted someone who didn't deserve it. That's not foolish. That's human." He nodded, his throat tight. "I should have seen it. I was so busy building a life that I forgot to protect the one that mattered most." Angela walked closer. "Sometimes God lets us break, so we learn how to see." Her words, simple and gentle, settled into the air like balm. She turned toward the nursery, and for a moment, the billionaire just watched her, this quiet woman who had risked everything to tell the truth. He whispered, mostly to himself, "The world would fall apart if people like you stopped caring." Angela smiled faintly and whispered back, "Then I guess I'll just keep caring, sir." As Angela walked down the hallway that night, the echo of her steps carried more power than any boardroom speech. She wasn't rich. She wasn't powerful. But she had saved a life when everyone else failed. And it makes you wonder. If you were in Angela's shoes, unseen, unheard, surrounded by people who didn't believe you, would you have spoken up? Or would you have stayed silent? Tell us in the comments below. Because sometimes, the hardest part of doing what's right is being the only one brave enough to do it. Days passed, and with each sunrise, the mansion that once echoed with despair began to breathe again. The beeping of medical machines faded into the laughter of new mornings. For the first time in weeks, sunlight entered the nursery without being dimmed by fear. Baby William's recovery was steady, miraculous, the doctors said. His cheeks, once pale and hollow, bloomed with soft color. His cry, once frail and fading, now filled the air like a song that everyone in the house had forgotten the words to. Angela stood by his crib, gently rocking him in her arms, humming an old hymn her mother used to sing back in Louisiana. "Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound," she whispered. The baby's little hand grasped her finger tightly, as if anchoring himself to the world again. Aaron watched from the doorway, silent, humbled, overwhelmed. He had seen money save empires, technology cure diseases, and power change governments. But nothing compared to what he was witnessing now, a simple act of love and courage bringing his son back to life. He spoke quietly, afraid to break the peace. "You have a way with him." Angela smiled. "Children can feel who loves them, sir. They always know." Aaron nodded, emotion thick in his voice. "You saved him. When the best doctors couldn't. You saw what none of us did." She shook her head softly. "No, sir. I just paid attention." He stepped further into the room. His voice trembled as he said, "When I lost my wife, I thought I'd lost my heart too. I married Victoria because I thought stability could replace love. I was wrong. But watching you, Angela, I've realized that love doesn't need power or wealth to matter. It just needs truth." Angela lowered her gaze, her heart pounding. "Truth has a cost, sir. Sometimes it takes everything to speak it." "And yet you did," he replied. The silence that followed wasn't awkward, it was sacred. The kind that happens when two people realize their lives have been irreversibly changed by grace. Later that afternoon, Aaron gathered the remaining staff in the great hall. He stood before them, holding his son, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I called you all here because it's time to acknowledge something that money can't buy and power can't demand," he began. "When everyone else looked away, one person saw what was really happening under this roof. One person saved my son's life. Her name is Angela." The room murmured softly. Angela stood near the back, eyes wide, hands trembling. She had not expected this. Aaron continued, "For 12 years, she has served this home quietly, faithfully, and with more heart than anyone I've ever known. Today, she is not just a maid. She is family." The staff clapped, hesitant at first, then wholeheartedly. The sound echoed through the marble corridors, filling every corner with warmth. Angela's eyes filled with tears. "Sir, I don't know what to say." Aaron smiled gently. "Then don't. You've already said more through your actions than words ever could." He handed her a sealed envelope. "This is a trust fund in your name and your family's. It's the least I can do for the woman who gave me back my son." Angela tried to refuse, shaking her head. "You don't owe me anything." He met her eyes and said, "You're wrong, Angela. I owe you everything." That evening, the sunset painted the sky in hues of gold and rose. Angela stood in the garden behind the mansion, the scent of fresh rain still lingering in the air. She could hear laughter inside, Aaron reading to his son, the boy's giggle lighting up the room. For the first time in a long time, the house sounded alive. Angela knelt by the flower beds, whispering a quiet prayer. "Thank you, Lord, for giving me the courage to see what others couldn't. For letting me be where I was needed." The wind rustled through the trees, soft and warm, as if heaven itself was answering. As the night settled, Aaron came outside, holding William in his arms. The baby reached toward Angela, smiling, his small fingers grasping the air. Aaron chuckled softly. He doesn't want to sleep without saying good night to his guardian angel. Angela's heart swelled. "I'm no angel, sir. Just someone who couldn't walk away." He smiled. "That's what makes you one." The three of them stood there for a moment, the billionaire, the maid, and the child whose life had bound their worlds together. The mansion lights glowed behind them, but it wasn't wealth that illuminated their faces. It was gratitude. It was grace. And maybe this story isn't just about saving a child's life. Maybe it's about saving our own humanity, about listening when no one else does, about speaking when silence feels safer. If you were in Angela's shoes, surrounded by power, ignored by those above you, would you have spoken up? Would you have risked everything for the truth? Tell us in the comments below. Your answer might inspire someone to do what's right when it matters most. Angela looked up at the stars before heading back inside. Somewhere deep in her heart, She knew this wasn't the end of her story, just a new beginning written by courage. And for the first time, as she closed the nursery door behind her, she smiled, not the smile of a maid, but of a woman who had become the miracle in someone else's life. If this story moved you, don't let it fade when the screen goes dark. Like this video, share it with someone who needs to remember their worth, and subscribe to join us for more stories that touch the soul and remind the world what real humanity looks like.